Well, here we fucking go.
Enter!
Ah, Mr. McClary. So glad you could join me, and sorry to have got you out of bed. Shut the door and have a seat.
I'm fine, standing.
Sit your arse in that chair, you fucking liability.
The year is 1975. Cameron McLeary, aka Cass, is a Scottish electrician on an oil rig called Bayrat D in the middle of the North Sea. His beloved, Suze, is upset with him. She didn't want him to go to that rig, leaving her and their children alone back at home. She sends him a letter saying that even though she loves Cass, she will break up if Cass does not deal with this. So with this letter begins a long streak of bad luck for Cass. Everything gets worse and worse as he moves along the rig. But there is always a hint of hope in the supernatural horror story. A hope of survival. A hope of putting things right. Still Wakes the Deep is a first-person narrative-focused horror game from the developer The Chinese Room, best known for their other narrative-focused games such as Dear Esther, Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, and Amnesia: Machine for Pigs. If you have played this, you should know more or less what to expect, because Still Wakes the Deep is like an accumulation of them. The Chinese Room has almost perfected their niche with this title. The main character walks in intricately designed corridors, runs away from monstrosities, and through this journey experiences a kind of catharsis that results in clarity of mind. As players, we behold this journey through the eyes of the main character. All we do is walk and maybe occasionally pull some levers along the way. This by no means belittles what the game has to offer. Think of Larian Studios. They perfected their craft in Baldur's Gate 3. Does anybody expect Rockstar Games to make an RPG like BG3 instead of GTA 6? Do you think Paradox Interactive will buy the rights of Red Dead Redemption IP and release an open world continuation where you can floss your character's teeth, and if you don't, they will feel pain when they drink a cold beer? Would you expect from Software to announce a new life simulation game like The Sims? It will be a unique experience for sure, but as a fan of Souls games, you would expect a sequel to Elden Ring. I think what you expect from Still Wakes the Deep will determine whether you enjoy it or not. So then, let me tell you what to expect. In its essence, this is a walking simulator. Well, you can run, you can climb, you can crawl, you can jump and hold. Pull some levers, unscrew screws, put out fires with conveniently placed fire extinguishers. And solve some really difficult puzzles. And don't forget about the innovative monster AI. Let's not kid ourselves and manage our expectations. This is a corridor horror game that focuses on narrative rather than gameplay, and this is not necessarily a bad thing. You worked all day, came home too exhausted to do anything but lie on your couch and play a game that will not require you to learn mechanics with plenty of tutorials and grind for hours to compete with others to have a meaningful and enjoyable experience out of it. The game you play is Still Wakes the Deep. It offers a complete story and you can finish it in 1 or 2 sessions. It is about 4 to 6 hours long. The best of all, it is on Game Pass. All you need to do is download the game, lie back, and let a carefully crafted story unfold. The selling point of the game is that it is John Carpenter's The Thing, but on an oil rig filled with skulls and their funny accent. But this game is its own thing. While playing it, I didn't think of The Thing. The similarities do not deprive its authenticity from the game. For me, the movie was more about the nature of human species in general, while the game focused more on Kaz and his own internal conflicts. The main motive was trust in the movie. Characters were isolated inside a group, whereas in the game, it was not about mutual trust. It was about running away from your problems. Kaz isolated himself from his problems. There is hardly a better place for isolation or running away from your problems than an oil rig in the middle of the sea. Combined with the authentic Scottish voice actors, so authentic that they had to add a subtitle option to transcribe certain Scottish jargon, the setting is quite original, despite certainly not unprecedented. The wind is howling gravely. The waves crash into each other at the bottom of the rig. The weather is often windy and foggy, and it always rains ever so slowly. The unkempt, neglected oil rig, Beirut D, witnesses all this while its metal pipes creak with agony, like it is aware of what's about to happen. Surely, an oil rig is a scary place even before a supernatural being turns your colleagues into spaghetti and meatballs. But more importantly, it is a place of total seclusion. Rich white people, when they want to be away from their rich white problems, withdraw into a resort in Ecuador or Costa Rica or maybe Hawaii. Well, I don't know, I'm not rich. And then there is Kaz. I think everybody can agree that an oil rig is a perfect choice for a horror setting, especially considering the fact that the year is 1975. The ways of communication with the outer world are restricted, and the safety regulations are not followed rigidly, as we also discover early in the story. As important as the choice of setting, if not more so, is how the developers utilize this place. The oil rig is not necessarily a big playground that allows endless creativity, given the fact that the developers remained faithful to a real oil rig in the 70s. They watched documentaries and benefited from real sources from that time to create an oil rig designed with intricate details and true to its real-life equivalent. There are several maps of the layout, and there is a floor plan on each level. Every nook and cranny is designed carefully to represent a real oil rig. In this tight space, the game never lets you fully familiarize yourself with the ins and outs of Beirut D. Where the size of the map falls short, the reorganization of levels as you progress makes up for it. Beirut D is collapsing under the grip of a supernatural being. The dwarves delve too greedily and too deep, so the drill hits something and the rig starts to collapse. As the time passes, the structure breaks down, bottom levels are flooded, everything catches on fire, and the equipment falls over everywhere because of the regular quakes. Weather changes, corridors shift, it is pure chaos on Beirut D. The rig transforms itself, and even though we are technically on the same map, the levels don't look alike. Not getting used to your surroundings means that you never get too comfortable, and is a great attribute for a horror game. But unfortunately, you do get comfortable with the map, because it is basically a corridor that you walk straight. I rarely got scared or excited playing this game. I rarely do in this genre. The problem with the corridor horror is that it is linear. You expect to walk a straight line while completing objectives, and exactly that happens. Does not mean that corridor horrors are not scary. Walking in the same loop throughout the game in PT was dreadful. Every turn around the corner scared the hell out of you, but you still wanted to walk the same corridor again just to see what happens. When it got cancelled, it was very disappointing for gamers around the world, no matter if they like the genre or not. I'm hyped to play Kojima's next horror game, Overdose, when it's released, just because what I felt in PT. Still Wakes the Deep did not have this effect on me, because it left no room for surprise. The game guides you through the end. Whatever you need to do, no matter how simple it is, there are specific instructions for you to follow. Even for pulling a lever back or removing safety pins from their place, there are instructions telling you how to do it. And just in case you're in doubt halfway through, Kaz himself tells you what to do. If you don't know the way, just follow the yellow paint. It is an optional choice that can be turned off, but the main problem here is that the game discourages you from going out of the intended way and offers no surprises when you follow it. Just at the start of the game, when I was heading to the canteen, I decided to take a different route to check what was happening on the deck. However, there were crates conveniently placed in front of the door heading out onto the deck, so I had to continue with the mission. When I had finished socializing in the canteen and the new mission was to go outside onto the deck, the crates magically disappeared and the path was clear again. Wherever you go, there are invisible walls. The only thing you can do is follow a certain path. If you want to go off the road, the supernatural monster blocks the way. You can normally break the locks on the doors, but when you want to open a door that is not story related, your ability to break locks is null. Your hands are tied. It is not just that. You also know exactly when you're going to face a monster. Sometimes other NPCs tell you that there is a monster ahead. Other times you realize because how the level is designed, when the monster shows itself to you before you have to face it. For all intents and purposes, all you need to do is follow the route and avoid getting caught. Still Wakes the Deep put Unreal Engine 5 to the test and exhibits an oil rig that at first glance fills the player with both dread and amazement for its elaborate design and overcast atmosphere. Nonetheless, as you continue to follow a straight line while you are told exactly what to do, you get comfortable and simply enjoy the overall atmosphere. This feels purposely implemented. The developers obviously wanted to focus on narrative and aimed for every type of player to experience a compact story that leaves an impact, without having them deal with the challenges of gaming. But does the story really leave an impact on the player? Well, that's debatable. Reading Sue's letter brings Kaz down, but he proceeds to the canteen to have some breakfast unaware of what's to come. While having a chat with the cook, Roy, the manager, Rennick, calls out angrily for Kaz on the speakers. After a heated moment, we learn the reason why Rennick reprimands Kaz. Apparently, Kaz came here to this godforsaken oil rig because he was escaping police. It turns out Kaz had a fight with one Billy Chamberlain. Billy badmouths Kaz's wife, and as an ex-boxer, Kaz knocks the fella out. Roy, the cook and the godfathers to Kaz's children, finds a job for him on the rig, and Sue does not approve of all this, so much that she threatens to break up with him if Kaz runs away. He does, and Sue gives him another chance to come back and face his problems. Back in Rennick's office, the telephone rings amidst the confrontation. Gibbo warns Rennick that something feels off with the drill, but the show must go on. Rennick does not care about all that. He commands them to keep drilling, then he fires Kaz. So Kaz walks onto the helipad to go back home. Just when you think worse could it be than this, the whole rig shakes with a blow and Gregor falls off the edge of the helipad, barely hanging on the platform. Kaz runs to help, but they both fall into the sea. Brody and Douglas pull Kaz off the water and then begins a whole campaign of getting off the rig. Kaz finds the supernatural being down the rig where there used to be a drill. He works his way to accommodation department and finds Roy. Making sure Roy is okay, he heads for the lifeboats, but the mechanism doesn't work and the boats drown into the sea. Rennick somehow sees this and reaches for Kaz on the telephone line. He tells Kaz to get to the helipad. Kaz barely makes it to the helipad, but the chopper takes off without him, even though they see him approaching and waving his hands. Good thing too, because just a second later the helicopter comes back and crashes onto the rig. Now Brody calls and tells Kaz to get to the radio room to call a support ship. Guess what happens? Electricity cuts off and now Kaz, as an electrician, has to go and manually start the generator. This goes on like that. Problems arise one after another, and you walk through the rig to buy some time until the inevitable happens. In the end, Kaz and the others fight to their last breath against this monster that grabs the oil rig and its workers in its claws. But when Brody dies too, Finlay finally gives up. She stands up with the lighter Kaz gave her in the beginning of the game and runs for the source of this monster. But she is crushed after another quake that shakes and demolishes a support frame. On her last breath, Finlay tells Cass that they have to face the reality. They are doomed to die from the very beginning. The supernatural being must not get to the mainland. It must be destroyed before getting in touch with any other living thing. Cass's fate is sealed once he decides to ignore his wife, runs away from the police, and takes his first step onto the rig. He realizes that they never had a chance. He cannot run away anymore. He has to face the consequences of his actions. Finlay hands him the lighter and Cass proceeds to explode the oil rig with the monster inside it. The lighter and the explosion symbolize a revelation. Despite being too late, Cass finally understands that there is no running away from your actions. They will follow you to wherever you go. With this revelation, the supernatural being is defeated, and we learn a life lesson. Still Wakes the Deep is about running away from problems and facing them. Cass thinks all the problems at home will vanish once he runs away. This whole story is built upon proving Cass wrong. I could argue that this shape, this supernatural being, is the representation of nature, and it's all a classic man versus nature theme. Humans dig deep with their big ego and insatiable greed, so the nature teaches them a lesson while revealing their hidden insecurities to the player. There are valid points that could support this argument, but I think it was more personal. The body horrors that the supernatural monster creates through human bodies are scary and very disturbing to look at, but the otherworldly being with its muscly tentacles wrapping around the rig has this weird aura that feels beautiful and soothing. The first time Cass beholds its beauty is when he uses the maintenance lift. The way up is spiraled around with beautiful tentacles, and at the top shines a light like a white pearl. Cass metaphorically ascends to heaven, and it is a foreshadowing of his final demise. It is almost like this strange being offers respite for Cass. It calls for him, urges him to face it. This thing manifests fears and anxiety, discloses inner thoughts, uncovers ignored problems, shows what you care about the most. It feeds on this and gets bigger as it devours the miserable souls. These souls, Cass's friends will transmute into body horrors absorbed by this entity, scream out their fears, being stared at, being abandoned, a sense of inferiority, dying, or panic. Finlay hears her son when the monster is near. Cass sees memories and even hallucinations of Zeus. This monster brings out psychological problems, personal traumas. There is no combat mechanic in the game because until the end, Cass runs away from his monster, just like he runs away from his problems. In the end, Cass, left without any other option, faces reality and destroys his problems by the root. Still Wakes the Deep is an adventure horror story that tries its best to separate itself from the walking simulator, an interactive movie genre, by implementing minor gameplay mechanics, but failing to do so because of its corridor levels and the lack of mechanic complexity. The game adds depth to the story with flashbacks that adequately describe the situation the main hero is in. The starting idea of an oil rig being ravaged by a mysterious cosmic horror after being awoken by a drill is authentic and interesting. The flashbacks that recounts the story is laudable, but the part we actually play evokes a feeling of playing an Uncharted game without all the cool mechanics and puzzles. The only thing Cass does is to run from one place on the rig to another just to pull some lever and push some buttons. After the initial explosion and monster outbreak, it offers no surprise, no plot twists, no ifs and buts. The story is a complete package, concise, condensed and compelling. Unfortunately, the part we are actively engaged with is not fun. You don't get scared because the pattern is the same throughout the game and it's easily predictable. The pursuit of reciting a certain narrative for a broader audience gets ahead of other aspects. Additionally, the story does not branch out, and then you question whether it will be better adapted into a movie than a game. Still Wakes the Deep offers an authentic idea, a compact story, photorealistic visuals, intricate location design, and what to find today. It presents you exactly what you expected before buying. The downsides are connected with this predictability in every sense. The game is not scary because of its predictability. The missions are not enjoyable because they are easy to complete and they repeat, so they are predictable. The gameplay does not offer challenge because we do the same simple thing with detailed instructions, so they become predictable. Overall, Still Wakes the Deep deserves playing, just because of how much of a complete package it is. It is a culmination of the Chinese room's efforts to this day. It has its problems, but you get exactly what you paid for, and that is a huge thing in today's marketing world that promotes hype culture and publishing works that are unfinished. Download the game on Game Pass, get comfortable, and enjoy your evening.
Aye. A happy new year to you too, you cunt.